You got to embellish a little bit, though. I guess that's the real truth of podcasts.
We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, in that case, welcome to Yelling at Concrete Podcast.
Hey, I'm happy to be here.
I mean, that's good. I mean, if you were unhappy to be here, this would be a very long hour.
Well, happy to be here in my apartment like every other day for the past couple of years.
Yeah, life has become that.
Yeah.
I like to think as well, because I put the podcast out so often, it looks like I haven't moved on like in 2 years either, because I'm always just sat in the same place and my hair changes length, but that's about it.
I think everybody's sat in the same place at this point. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm terrible at introducing people. So if you do the honors, would you introduce yourself and who you are and what you do?
Oh, yeah, sure. My name's Aaron Long, and I'm an animator, I guess. Director, I guess. It feels weird calling myself a director, but I am a person who works as a director in animation. And I make my own independent cartoon as well as working in the industry. My independent cartoon is called Sublo and Tangy Mustard. And otherwise, I usually work, I've been working the past few years on Tuca and Bertie, and before that, Bojack Horseman and various other things.
Just some small titles, just
yeah,
casual title.
And I'm from Toronto originally in Canada, but right now I'm in Los Angeles. Although I'm about to visit Toronto again next week, which I'm excited about.
Nice. How long you been in Los Angeles then?
I've spent most of my time in Los Angeles since like 2013, which I'm not thrilled about.
No?
I moved there after college, kind of semi-accidentally. Like I thought I would just be coming here to try, like basically to work on one season of one show.
Okay.
And then go back to Toronto. And then another show started immediately after. And they were like, we need everybody. You're all on this next show. And I was like, all right, I guess I'll stick around for another 6 months or something. And then it just kept building. And I lost track of time. And then the pandemic happened. And I've been here for too long now.
That does tend to happen. I feel that way about, the city I'm in. I came and basically settled into a job and thought, oh, yeah, I'll be here for a couple of years.
Yeah,
that was a decade ago.
It happens, yeah.
you do kind of end up a bit trapped, but yeah.
What city are you in?
So I'm in Lincoln, which is in the UK, but nobody really knows where that is because it's not London, which is basically how the UK works.
Is it?
So this is the way to describe it. It's right in the middle and on the east.
Oh, okay.
So if you look at it, it's like just on that side. And then it's a very small city. It's not Toronto or Los Angeles in any way.
Well, Toronto's a pretty small city compared to Los Angeles too.
Really?
Yeah, it's not tiny, but it's like a normal-ish sized city, I think. And then Los Angeles is like this monster city that it's like 5 separate cities sprawled out enough that they connected with each other and just kind of absorbed each other.
Same. That's
how it feels to me anyway. I think that's basically what happened.
I visited Toronto in 2019.
Yeah,
I kind of took myself on holiday to Canada, cool. And I did like a 10-day road trip, which took me through most of Ontario. But yeah, Toronto, I kind of stepped off the train. I was like, well, this is a big city.
Yeah, it's a big city. It's not like the biggest city or anything, but I love Toronto. It's my favorite city probably. Since it's the one I'm from, I guess. I'm
always I feel bad because my impression of Toronto was kind of soured.
Oh yeah.
But mainly because of the hotel I was staying in at the time.
Oh, okay.
Which was down the street from a strip club, and then down the street from like a whole host of homeless people. And every time I stepped out of my hotel, I was like, "Oh, strip club and homeless people."
Yeah, it doesn't sound like the ideal first impression. Yeah.
No, but I realize different areas of different places have their own problems. Lincoln's got dodgy areas.
Yeah, as well. Every city's got some seediness to it, I guess.
Yeah. So you're trying to make it back to Toronto, or you?
Yeah, eventually. That's the plan. But it's during the pandemic, I was planning to, and then at the peak of the pandemic, it kind of feels like, well, why go to all the trouble of moving right now and just going to be sitting in sitting in a box in Toronto instead of sitting in a box in Los Angeles. But now it feels like everything's opening back up again, and I am really missing it. So I'm not permanently moving back yet, but I'm doing a visit.
Dipping your toe to figure out.
Yeah. Well, I don't need to dip my toe. I'd jump in all the way if I could, but I'm waiting for my girlfriend to be able to immigrate as well, and that's sort of what's been holding us.
Yeah. I mean, that'll happen. Family gets in the way.
Yeah. But it's okay.
Just smuggle her in.
I've got some pretty big suitcases. She might be able to get in.
Yeah, that's the answer to it. Not that we're like encouraging people to smuggle people across borders, but maybe because it's only like the US and Canada. Nobody cares which way you go. But as far as I know,
they got some pretty heavy duty customs for some reason. I guess there's been various issues
suspicious
over the years. Yeah, but it's mostly easier than other countries, I guess. But there's still a border. They still can be jerks if they want to. A friend of mine had a visa. I was on one visa for years, and now I'm on a different one. But a friend, and the way that you do it is that you just kind of apply. I don't know if I should talk too much about visas online, but anyway, you kind of apply as you're going through customs, and it seems like they can basically just say they can give you the visa as you're going through customs, or they're in a bad mood and you get a customs officer who's not happy that day, they can just deny it for basically no reason, it seems.
Wow.
And so I've never had that experience, but my friend from Toronto, who was also in LA, had that experience, and she just had to go back. Which is not ideal. Yeah.
No, that's not what you want when you're making moves and getting out there.
Yeah. She's okay now. She's working on a show up there.
Okay.
There's a lot of animation work in Toronto too. It's like
it's like a central hub.
There's a lot of preschool shows and a lot of work for American shows where the actual animation is done up in Toronto. So there's a good amount.
Expediting all the work over to Canada because nobody in the US will.
Yeah. Well, people in the US want to animate, but no studios want to pay people to animate in the US,
Right. Okay. That makes sense.
Like we'll do the pre-production kind of key creative decisions here in LA and then send it to.
So when I saw your work and I saw Sublo and Tangy Mustard, it reminded me of kind of old Cartoon Network stuff.
Like,
initial impression. It's kind of like Ed, and Eddie and Cow and Chicken and all that kind of animation. Yeah,
those are great. Yeah,
I kind of assumed you would because
I mean, I saw like Cow and Chicken a lot as a kid. And that show, I still think that, and Ed and Eddie, actually, those are two good ones. Definitely, they have some of the best like animation on TV shows.
Yeah,
I feel like. Because like there's a lot of TV cartoons that are good, but like good as shows, but the animation isn't really that standout. But those two in particular, it's a high compliment to me because those are two of the best looking ones, I think.
Yeah, I think just everything about it was just kind of it fully reminded me or slipped me into that kind of nostalgia trip of this. I remember this, and it prompted me because when I found out, I was like, when was this made? It's like thinking through like. This seems like culturally relevant, but
so well, I mean, I'm fairly old now, I guess, 32, but
I mean, I'm 32. So we're on the same balance here.
Little chunks of coal here.
Yeah, the kids think we're old, and the old people think we're young. That's how life goes.
That's how it goes for everybody. But yeah, I mean, I like a lot of old stuff, but I don't necessarily deliberately try to make it sort of like retro style, like I did this other cartoon like a decade ago now called Fester Fish, which was more kind of self-consciously in the style of like old Looney Tunes and like Betty Boop and Popeye and things like that.
Yeah.
And it was sort of supposed to be more old-timey. And I think like for the first one, I even put, the classic film grain preset effect on it or something.
Yeah.
I was really like trying to be like, look, this is like an old thing. And then I sort of started wanting to do things that were less self-consciously like something else and more just sort of whatever I felt like doing, I guess.
Yeah.
Which still tends to be, very influenced by other things, but hopefully a little more original, I guess.
Oh, definitely. I mean, that's a good question then. Why did you start Sublo and Tangy Mustard?
Well, I sort of always liked doing animation, you know, like and working in the industry and stuff. And I always sort of got into it, as I think a lot of people do, to do my own original projects. And it was just sort of a thing that I came up with to do. Like I was sort of trying to come up with different projects, and then that ended up being the one that I was excited about enough to actually start doing, you know?
Yeah.
And there was this guy who was asking me to pitch stuff to him, who actually is still asking me to pitch stuff to him, but he never really goes for my ideas. Oh. And so I pitched that one to him, and he was like, "Oh, I don't know if this is right for us right now at this company," but I just started making it anyway, just for fun. And I sort of do it in like short batches. Like, I mean, I guess seasons is the word, but it takes me like 3 or 4 years to do a season, so it feels weird calling them that.
Yeah.
But like I do them in little chunks so that if I want to stop at a certain point, I sort of have enough that there's like a, you know, it works as like a solid show. But then if I want to keep going, then I can do more.
Yeah.
And I guess the idea for it sort of came from, I live in here in LA. I live right near Hollywood and Highland, which is like this kind of miserable tourist area where, you know, there's like the Walk of Fame on the street, and there's like all the people dressed up as Jack Sparrow and like Charlie Chaplin and Superman, and Jack Sparrow and Jack Sparrow. There's a lot of Jack Sparrows.
You got to feed the need, right? On the street, it's just a
huge demand in 2022 for like Jack 10 Sparrow. Different Jack Sparrows. Yeah. But there's always, you know, there's like a guy in a weird Chewbacca costume that seems to be made of shredded cardboard or something.
Right.
There's this weird, I think I've mentioned this before other places too, but there's one of my favorites is this like 7-foot tall Elmo from Sesame Street, where he's wearing like lime green pants, and his eyes are kind of like not quite like aligned properly, and he just looks like barely recognizable as Elmo, and I thought that was really funny. And so I wanted to, you know, that's kind of why Tangy Mustard has that sort of vacant stare with his one eye. But also, so I live really close to that, but then I'd also be taking the subway here, and you'd see like a guy dressed as Spider-Man just commuting on the train or something, you know, and I just thought it was like a funny image to sort of follow somebody who's dressed up as this character like through their regular life as well as the spot that they go to be that character.
Yeah.
And I wanted to do something that was like explicitly set in Toronto because I was really missing Toronto at the time, and like and have been since I moved here. But in 2015, I was really craving some, you know, some Toronto. So I wanted to do a show where I could kind of draw a lot of buildings that look like Toronto buildings and stuff.
That's interesting.
And I guess that's the inception for the show, basically.
So it's not a classic story of you were secretly working at Subway and thought this would be the perfect thing for my animation.
No, I never actually worked at Subway. I just ate there a lot, like way too much during college. And it felt like an environment that I knew very well. You know, like I just kind of designed the restaurant, the subpar restaurant that they work at, like literally exactly like the Subway restaurant that was near my house at the time.
Right.
And yeah, it's very thinly veiled.
I love seeing that though. I love kind of. I think I was talking to a friend about this recently, of where you find little bits of inspiration to put into things, and it's just like anecdotal from life, and you may not even realize you've done it. And you're just like, oh, right, yeah. You know, I'm gonna draw a sub shop, and yeah.
It's funny because it's never, or at least in my experience and like people I know, it's never like these are like the 10 most important things in my life, you know. It's always just, oh, here's a random thing that happened to me 5 years ago. Who's the guy I went to college with, you know. It's not like this is about me and my 3 best friends. It's like just random memories and little things. Like Subway isn't super important to me, but it's something that I just was like, sure, why not? I'll put that in the show.
It always feels like one of those things you might like live to regret eventually, where like if it you know took off and became like a primetime show, and then suddenly everyone just starts bringing you Subway sandwiches.
Oh, I thought you meant I was going to get sued.
Oh, no.
I'd be okay with free sandwiches. I don't know how many I could eat at this point, but yeah, it would be that'd be a good problem to have. That's a champagne problem.
That's the secret.
When so many people love it that they're bringing me free sandwiches.
The show doesn't have to make money because I'll never need to buy food ever again. I'm just.
That would be great. I don't even need the Patreon at that point if my food income is totally covered by free sandwiches.
You heard it here
That's
first.
the dream. Although maybe not Subway. Maybe Quiznos. I like Quiznos more these days.
What's Quiznos? Quiznos is in the UK.
Maybe they don't have them. It's just another sandwich chain, but
sandwiches.
I like them a little better. They have different toppings and stuff you can get.
I mean, that's the fact of this podcast now. The title of this podcast is Aaron Long, willing to be paid in sandwiches.
Well, don't tell my bosses that. I don't want that secret to get out.
The industry will know. One way or another.
Don't know if the animation unions would be having that, paying people in sandwiches.
I mean, it just cuts out the middleman, right?
Everyone gets what do I need money for? To buy Subway sandwiches. Just give me the sandwiches, yeah.
It's the dystopia we want to aim for. There's worse ones to live in, I feel like.
Oh, there's a lot worse ones.
Depending on the type of sandwich, of course. Like, if it's a sandwich you hated and that was what all you were ever getting.
Well, I don't like fish. If people only brought me tuna, that could get ugly really fast.
I mean, yeah, that's
fish. I like those meatball ones.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's a divergent question. What's your favorite sandwich?
From Subway, probably the meatball one. But if it's Quiznos, then I'd take anything on the menu, baby.
Oh wow!
I love a lot of their stuff.
Just quickly became an advert for Quiznos.
I don't even know if there are any more around here. I think there were like 2 or 3 when I moved here, and then they all closed. So I hope they're still in business, but I haven't seen them lately.
I mean, I've heard of them, so they must be. To say they don't.
I'm not making them up. They're real.
Yeah, they're real. Where did I hear about? I'm just wondering where I heard them. I think I watched them on. Do you know Good Mythical Morning on YouTube?
Do I know what?
Good Mythical Morning with Ren.
No, I don't think so.
They're like YouTubers, but I think they do like lots of like sandwich taste tests. Like when you end up in a YouTube hole and you're just watching people eat and you don't really know why.
Well, that's actually another reason that I wanted to do Sublo and Tangy Mustard and make it so specifically set in Toronto and Canada and stuff, is because I realized when I moved here that I'd picked up a bunch of knowledge of random American and LA things just from movies and stuff.
Right.
That there's no need that somebody from Toronto needs to know what Jamba Juice is or hear about Ralph's or whatever, but because we didn't have those in Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew all these names from, I don't know, comedy movies and stuff.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, why is that? Like, nobody knows anything from Toronto because you never see it even in Canadian media.
Yeah.
So I thought it'd be fun to do, there's an episode of my cartoon where they go to a pharmacy chain called Shoppers Drug Mart that just is all over the place in Toronto, and there's nothing exciting about it, but I just thought it'd be good to put some mundane stuff in there.
I think that's key, though. I think there's, I mean, obviously there's a whole conversation we could have there about representation of just, people learning about Toronto, and I mean,
because I watch a lot of like UK stuff too, and I know, things like Tesco's, and like why do I know that?
I mean, Tesco's general supermarket, I guess.
Exactly, yeah. But I don't need to know about that. But I know a bunch of, I knew about Vaughn's, which is just a grocery store chain in Los Angeles that somehow made its way to my ears in Toronto. So I figured I'd put some Toronto stuff in other people's ears. Sublo and Tangy Mustard.
That's the way to do it. You have just reminded me, though, I recently saw a thing about people learning different store names and not really knowing what those stores are from other countries.
Oh yeah.
There's so in the US you have the dollar store, which is, I don't really like, I'm assuming it's just everything's a dollar. That's
at this point some stuff is $1, but it's just cheap stuff.
Yeah, just cheap stuff. But we have a UK equivalent.
Mm-hmm. We just don't call them dollar stores.
We don't call it dollar store.
Well, you don't call them dollars, right?
No, we call it Poundland.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it was just online of someone who was freaking out over a reaction. It was like, do you guys know what pound means? Like you made Poundland. as your.
Yeah, that's wouldn't translate too well to America.
No, it doesn't quite say.
I mean, that could have been the strip club in Toronto by your hotel.
I mean, I don't know much about the strip club. I know they had an offer on, which was advertised heavily on the outside, but it was quite a weird setup. I mean, I can't describe where it was in any way, shape, or form, but I remember looking at it and it had like a, like old film movies, like cinemas used to have the plastic cards with the letters, and it would like
on
the outside. It had one of those
marquee
boards.
thing.
Yeah. It had one of those on the outside, and I looked at it and I was like, oh, that's a cinema. And then I got closer to it and I realized that it was not a cinema.
Yeah, that's not surprising. There's a lot of those kinds of establishments around Toronto.
It just seems so, I don't know, flagrant. When Lincoln has a strip club, but it's hidden down like a back alley. We're British, so we don't talk about it. So
yeah. Well, there used to be I don't know if they're still around, but there's a grocery store chain in Los Angeles called Fresh and Easy.
Okay.
And one time I was walking down Hollywood Boulevard, which sounds a lot more glamorous than it is, but I was walking down Hollywood Boulevard and there was some tourists walking by and they were looking around and they saw a sign that said Fresh and Easy, which is the grocery store, and they went, okay, this one's got to be a strip club. They're having a hard time finding one, I guess.
How do you advertise your strip club when all the grocery stores keep finding all the names?
There's one down the street from me called Crazy Girls, Live Girls, Girls, and it's across the street from the Jim Henson Company. So there's a statue of Kermit the Frog looking out onto the street, tipping his hat, and if you look across to where he's tipping his hat to, it's the strip club.
That's fantastic.
You see it on Google Maps.
The little things like that. It's the little things in everything we have which make everything, worth living, as it were. No, I mean, going back to animation, just kind of briefly. Then I had a couple of kind of like boilerplate questions for you about animation.
Yeah.
What was the first animation you remember watching?
I watched so much animation as a kid. I mean, I can think of ones that had big impressions on me early on. Yeah. I guess it's not technically animation, but I really loved Thomas the Tank Engine as a kid.
I mean, that's animation.
It's
stop motion.
It's it's some hybrid thing. It's because they wasn't, they were actually just filming model trains moving around and stuff. So it's not like they were like pausing and then moving it a little bit like traditional stop motion. But I mean,
ruining my childhood.
Little sets and stuff. Yeah. No, making it better. They were doing it live. But yeah, I liked that a lot. I liked Looney Tunes a lot. My dad was obsessed with Looney Tunes, and he kind of got me obsessed with it too. I think the first one that I ever saw was the one where these two French chefs are trying to cook Bugs Bunny in France, probably.
That's familiar. Yeah.
I think it's called French Rarebit, or I don't know what it's called. Something.
Some soft pun.
Yeah, it's a pun about rabbit.
Yeah.
Anyways, I really loved Looney Tunes as a kid, and still do. I liked Ren and Stimpy a lot, but the whole series has a bit of a stink on it now, with the creator having been revealed to be a monster.
That seems to happen a lot with like things from our childhood at the moment, right?
Yeah,
it's just keep kind of souring.
Yeah. So yeah, I haven't been too tempted to revisit that one since that news, but it was a big influence on me as a kid. The Simpsons, obviously, and I don't know, I liked a lot of preschool stuff, obviously. Like, I'm trying to think of what would have been the first thing that made a big impression.
Yeah.
I know there's footage of me as a 2-year-old watching the Disney movie Cinderella, and my mom says over the footage you can see Aaron's watching his favorite movie, Cinderella. So
that's adorable.
I know I really liked the mice in that one.
Okay.
They had like those like hats and stuff, I thought they were pretty cool. I liked Alvin and the Chipmunks a lot.
A lot of like what's the word, like drawn animation, not so much stop motion or anything.
Well, I liked a lot of stop motion too. Yeah. A lot of older British stop motion, especially. I really liked that Paddington show from the 70s.
Yeah.
Paddington Bear.
Yeah.
And Wallace and Gromit and things like that.
Wallace and Gromit is like hands down my favorite animation.
Yeah,
that was my childhood.
They're wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the other big things that I saw a lot as a kid that was really inspiring was the National Film Board of Canada. They had this, and I think they still do, just for years. They've been like decades and decades. They've just been funding independent shorts.
Okay.
And those are all really kind of artistically all over the place. And there's a really fun one called The Big Snit that I love, about this married couple who are playing Scrabble, and there's like a nuclear war starting around the house outside them.
Okay.
And that one, I think if you like other people, I didn't really think of it as like a key influence initially. And then other people kept saying, oh, like I can totally see that you got like the wiggly lines in your backgrounds from that. And I went, oh yeah, I loved that as a kid, that the lines in that one are all wiggly. And when the characters move, they're kind of boiling, you know?
Yeah.
And that's one of my favorite cartoons ever. That's that, you know, if you look up like probably the 10 most famous NFB cartoons are probably 10 of my favorite cartoons.
I mean, that's not a bad thing, you know.
Yeah.
But again, that's like another kind of outside influence which you don't necessarily notice, just like sneaking its way into your work.
Yeah, there's just all kinds of just things that feel so commonplace, and that I think moving sort of made me like moving out of Canada made me notice what was specifically Canadian that I hadn't necessarily picked up on, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know if they ever showed it in the UK, but there's this other cartoon from the 80s called The Raccoons that I used to really like.
That does sound familiar.
And it was about three raccoons, and one of them had like a hockey jersey, and he had like a bent nose.
I do remember this. Yeah.
And he was always, I think he was like bangs into a tree in the opening or something. And there was this pink aardvark guy who was sort of like Mr. Burns before Mr. Burns from The Simpsons, named Cyril Sneer.
Yeah.
And he was trying to like bulldoze the forest they lived in. That was a fun show. I liked that. I loved the music in it. There was some really cool songs.
I mean, from this kind of point of view, then, like, why have you ever thought of why you got more interested in animation than, let's say, just like live action stuff?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, as a kid, I just was drawn to it because it was so otherworldly, you know, like the characters could move in weird ways that you can't realistically move. And I was, you know, fascinated by things like a character would clap and it wouldn't be the sound of hands clapping. It would be like, I don't know, some other sound effect, just things like that that you can't do, and you can do that in live action, but you know, you don't usually see it. Yeah, I don't know. And I liked drawing a lot as a kid, and I was sort of fascinated by the idea that I could take these drawings that I was doing and make them move.
Yeah.
And so then I started trying to do that. You know, you discover flip books and things, and then start drawing in like the margins of all your schoolwork and stuff. And the back of every school assignment would have like an Archie comic, or Archie and Jughead are going to a bar and getting drunk and stuff. That was a big phase for me.
I'm seeing a lot of like the same benchmarks of kind of my childhood. Of just recently, I was tidying out some boxes and I found a comic book which I forgot I'd made, and I went through a whole phase of drawing pigs.
Oh yeah.
And it was just disgruntled pigs. That's the entire premise. Was just, what if there was a pig? He was just annoyed by everything. Like it was very much along the lines of kind of like an annoyed duck. Like it was just this is all it is.
Great.
Like, well. Wow, it was
do you still draw at all, or what?
Yeah. So I mean, I do illustration.
Oh, you will. Yeah, of course. Yeah,
all these kinds of things.
That's right.
I do stuff.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah.
Obviously not to your scale of stuff, but I do stuff.
Well, no, I've seen it. Yeah. I just forgot. Stupid question.
Occasionally remake posters from old animated films as well.
I was gonna say I like that poster. Yeah.
I mean, presumably you know home movies from.
Yeah. Oh, that's the Adult Swim home movie show? Brendan Small. Yeah. I mean, I don't remember that particular one, but
that's from like a videotape.
Jason, yeah.
Yeah, like there was a random videotape in a random frame, and I reproduced that poster from that because I was like, yeah.
Nice. Yeah. I was gonna comment on that when we started. It was like, oh, that's funny, but now looking closer, obviously, that's Jason. Yeah.
Jason. Yeah.
What a great show. Yeah, that was another one of my favorite shows.
I feel like Adult Swim did a lot of like good shows.
Yeah. Well, that one especially didn't. I mean, it fit in on Adult Swim, but it had such a unique just the whole mood of it with like the kind of improvised feeling dialogue, and it didn't feel like it didn't come from the same place as a lot of their other stuff that were like William Street Studio.
Yeah,
I think they're kind of isolated. They were doing it at Soup to Nuts, which is in Boston, I think. So I think that's part of why it had a different feel, is that it was coming from a different place geographically.
Yeah. Everyone gets a unique sense of humor depending on where you're like located, I guess.
Yeah. Well, anytime you kind of just doing something next to a bunch of other people doing the same thing, you're going to kind of be rubbed off a little bit with it,
Yeah, definitely.
I don't know if that phrasing is right, but it will rub off on you a little bit.
A little bit of innuendos, man.
Yeah. Like you mentioned Ed and Eddie earlier, and the people who worked on that show, one of the things they said about it was that part of the reason that they feel they were able to get away with a lot of the stuff they did is because they weren't physically at Cartoon Network when they made it.
Okay,
they were they were actually in Canada. It was basically a Canadian show, just made with American money.
Yeah.
But because they weren't in the office, they weren't, there wasn't somebody looking over their shoulder going, "How are you doing this? This is how we're supposed to do it. Just follow the way we do it."
Right.
They would just, send them stuff and be like, "Hey, we did it. Don't ask how. We're doing it our way." Which I like. I really like when you see stuff that doesn't feel like it's coming through the same pipeline sort of setup as all the other stuff that's going on.
Yeah.
Where you can see that somebody's getting good results from something, but they clearly have their own sort of methodology.
Yeah.
That kind of thing appeals to me a lot.
Yeah, I mean that's why I kind of like when I'm ran across your work that's why I still, as much as I dislike YouTube as a platform these days because of advertisements ruining everything, it's one of the few platforms where I can go on and I can find something completely original and find something which is just some guy in a bedroom who's made something, some girl who's just thrown something together, and I'm like, this is great. It's untethered, and that's what we need.
That's the kind of thing I really appreciate more and more these days, because there's so much movies and shows, and not so much music, I guess, but just different forms of media that all feel like they're kind of being so sort of like watered down, and like the superficial elements are still intact, but it just feels like they're being hollowed out gradually.
Mm-hmm.
And because it still kind of looks the same from the outside, the audiences are like, yeah, it seems the same as ever. That's fine. Yeah. But you can kind of feel it getting a little bit worse. A lot of, I don't know, just corporate media, basically. So I really appreciate when you find some independent person who's doing just stuff their own way and making it good on their own terms, sort of, Yeah. That's a big joy in my life right now, is just finding that kind of stuff.
Doing it for the passion of it is something which I'm always encouraging. I think I completely kind of see what you mean, especially when I like look at Netflix and I look at like
Netflix
the stuff on
perfect example right now.
Yeah. And I remember, what show is it? I think like Archer had come out, and Archer seemed quite unique in its like style and everything like that. And then
definitely,
a year down the line, I saw 2 more shows come out, which were now stylized like Archer.
Oh yeah, what was there was like was there an Australian one that was sort of,
it was like
Danger Island or
something like that.
Is that the one?
Yeah,
I forget. I haven't seen it, but I remember seeing a trailer for it and going, oh, they're clearly just trying to make that look exactly like Archer.
Yeah. And I think Family Guy had that same effect as well, of just that animation style. Suddenly it was like, oh, everything which comes out now will look like this, and sound. And same with Rick and Morty. That
you see a lot of weird unholy hybrids of Rick and Morty and Family Guy right now. Yeah.
And it's sad, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. It would be great if, I've complained about this, if anybody I know listens to this, they're going to be like, oh, this is the thing Aaron always says. But you look at a lot of those shows and they don't look at all like something that a person actually sat and drew. It looks like something that somebody drew, and then an executive looked over and at it and went like, okay, make their eyes 10% bigger, move their nose down, and just like weird kind of very bland. It feels so like done by committee that you can tell like nobody draws a character like this naturally. This isn't anybody's real art style. This is like the most sort of put through a machine kind of look for a show.
Kind of homogenized,
like very homogenized.
Yeah. I think there's always seems to be kind of like a little bit of a miss of, especially when it comes to animation and anything like that, where shows have gone to this habit of, oh well, we can just make an animated version of it, but it's just like regular life, and it'll look normal. And I'm like, but you're dealing with a medium where you can do anything. Like,
yeah. There's a big trend of that in Canadian stuff the past few years, especially. I know I keep talking about Canada, but
it's a good place.
there's this show trailer. Oh, I don't want to badmouth everything, but there's this show Trailer Park Boys,
Yes,
and they, I love the early seasons of that, but they did an animated version recently, and it does not look great. It looks like exactly what I was saying. It looks like, something that's had like 100 passes of designs to water down and like make sure they like beat out any kind of personal artist's touch on it.
Yeah.
So it just sort of looks like I don't know. I forget what that software is called, but the one where you can kind of like create a character from pre-created assets,
Okay, yeah. I know.
Go Animate, I think.
Something like that, yeah.
But there's that show. There's this other show called Corner Gas that had an animated version that was also the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
There's this popular Canadian show, Letterkenny, that got an
animated version.
It's called Little Kenny, and it's them as babies or something. I didn't watch it, but this is a big thing in Canadian animation right now, is to do these really boring looking versions of live action shows.
Sitcom shows.
I
kind of love it. Karen, sorry.
Well, it's just they're always doing that kind of thing in the US too, but but it's a bit of an epidemic in Canada the last few years, especially.
I was just gonna say, I love the fact that you referenced Corner Gas, because I discovered Corner Gas when I was on my trip in Canada, came back, and nobody knows what it is in the UK.
Yeah, I was surprised even you. I mean, when did you go? 2019, you said?
So I went in 2019, and it was just on TV. And I was like, okay, what's this? And I sat down and watched it, and it reminded me so much of King of the Hill.
Yeah, it is like a bit of a live action King of the Hill.
Yeah. And I was just like, I love this. It's so deadpan. And I don't.
Oh, yeah, I like it.
I don't really get most of the references because I'm not Canadian, but I love it. And I couldn't stop watching it. So.
Well, I feel like that's the kind of thing where this has happened with some British stuff for me, the opposite way, where, you watch a bunch of it and you start picking up on like weird, like you'll have a bunch of random Canadian useless knowledge from watching 6 seasons of Corner Gas. Yeah.
Just binge watch a lot of Corner Gas, and then just sat there like, I don't know what to do with this information.
I found really funny watching it recently. Is they have this huge cast, like a huge regular cast for a show. I mean, usually you'd have, I don't know, 5 main characters or something, but Corner Gas has like 10, and it seems like they try to fit all of them into every episode. So there'll always be one main story with like I don't want to get too into the weeds, but with like, Brent and Hank and what's her name? The lady who runs the restaurant.
Oh,
anyway,
my mind's blanking.
Yeah, there'll be 2 or 3, main characters in the story, and there'll be a B story where there's some other, the cops are doing something, and then you'll have the like leftover characters, and it's like, oh, these 3 random ones that don't really have anything to do with each other, they're gonna do a puzzle in this episode, and we'll keep cutting back to them working on the puzzle, or one of them's got to assemble a shelf or something. Like, I don't think anybody's really clamoring for a story about putting together a shelf, but you got to give these actors something to do.
It almost
they all
like
have to be in every one.
Contractual at that point of just like, we need to get everybody in.
I think so, yeah. They wind up with like C and D stories. Yeah, like somebody has to go refill their water cooler or something.
So we can't open the coffee cup on this one. I mean, it's just... I just love that's what I loved about Corner Gas, because the stories were so mundane, and I remember describing it to a friend, and they were like, "Well, what's it about?" I was like, "Nothing really happens. You should watch it."
I mean, it is a good show though. I was like, I was impressed with how well it had held up in my own opinion of it. Because I whenever it was coming out, I think I was a teenager, and then watching it again recently, I was like, "Oh, I'm probably not going to like it as much as I did then." But I was like, oh, it's still a pretty good show.
Yeah.
The other thing I thought was funny about it when I saw it again recently, I think last time I visited Toronto in 2021, I looked at a few episodes on a plane. And there was a clip of them where they had a cutaway to like somebody in Hollywood or something, or somewhere in America. There's like a quick cutaway to like a studio executive or something.
Yeah.
And it's exactly the opposite of what you usually see on like an American show where they would do a cutaway to Canada, where it's the most like gratuitous kind of like the executive has like a cheap fake looking version of the Hollywood sign outside of his office window, and he's there's like palm trees outside his office window, and it's like the most fake American accent that just sounds like someone from Alberta or something.
Yeah.
Because usually you see like on an American show they'll do like a cutaway to Canada, and it's just like somebody with like a southern US accent.
Yeah.
That's not what Canadians sound like. What?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it's the same when they cut away to England, and it's always some like from guy from Victorian era England.
Yeah. There'll be like a cutaway to Buckingham Palace, and they'll be doing like Cockney accents.
It'll be one or two. Like there'll be at Buckingham Palace and royalty, or there'll be some like slum child from Oliver Twist just running around.
The two English identities, right?
the sad fact,
as far as America knows,
you always kind of think of it as like, yeah, but it is kind of true in certain areas. It's annoying when I live up to the stereotype.
No, I feel like it's frustrating even as a Canadian seeing that. It's like I'm aware of like 10 other accents that exist in the UK that you're not seeing in these kinds of things.
Yeah, I mean, we'll kind of touch on it in the sense of I always feel like with Canadian programming and UK programming, there's a slight overlap in terms of humor.
Yeah,
like they're more closely aligned than like American shows and UK
I could
shows.
see that. Yeah. It's always hard to describe because it's not like there's one style of comedy, but
yeah,
I do feel like with Canadian stuff and British stuff, there's simultaneously like a little bit more. There's almost maybe like two streams. There's the sort of more dry deadpan stuff, and also much broader, more surreal stuff than you tend to see with American shows.
Yeah, definitely.
In general, I mean, a lot of American things have been influenced by British comedy, and like there's shows that are exceptions for sure, but I feel like you do tend to see a lot of like surreal stuff, and then also quieter deadpan stuff.
Yeah, I think it was. I mean, when you work on your work, do you create it with more of kind of like an improvised surreal style, or are you just thinking a very flat line of right, this is what happens in this episode?
I don't know. It kind of depends. I mean, it's hard to say. It's so sort of intuitive because it's all just me, I don't have to sort of like I don't have a standardized process where I like brainstorm ideas and then show it to someone.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I do brainstorm ideas, but I just show it to myself. But I guess in general, it tends to be pretty mundane, sort of quieter stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But then on the other hand, then there's the Halloween episode where like this monster is like possessing people and pulling their eyes out and stuff. And that, it gets fairly surreal, kind of depending on the character. I think certain characters are more based in the real world, and like on Sublo and Tangy Mustard, and then their boss, Mr. Woo Bomber, he tends to kind of make things more surreal and nonsensical when he gets involved in the stories.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of a variety, I guess, to it. But I don't know how well it works if you're watching like 5 episodes in a row, because one will be really slice of life and then the other will be kind of nonsense.
I recently made a friend sit down and watch all of them.
Oh yeah.
It was
one of those, that.
You're going to watch this and we're going to sit through it. And I think because I've watched them a few times now, and there's moments within it which kind of catch me off guard each time.
Yeah.
And 2 of those moments are when they like get glued to the countertop.
Yeah.
And I'm just like forget it happens. They're like, oh yeah, they get glued to the countertop. And then in the Halloween episode where he just comes in and beats someone with a baguette. And
Charlie comes in with the stale bread. Yeah.
And he just comes in with stale bread. And then, but it's just like, but you knew we were under like attack, right? And it's just like, no.
Yeah, he's another character where he, his presence kind of pushes it in a more surreal direction. Yeah. The gluing them to the table thing, I think, was just a weird. It just seemed like such a dumb non-prank. There's nothing clever about it. It's just a mean thing to do. That kind of thing always makes me laugh. People just doing, not in real life, but the idea of it and like a show. Somebody just doing a mean thing and then being like, haha, do you get it? My joke? I pushed you or something, Because, like this, I think that's something that you see in real life, depending on certain people's sense of humor. There's this guy I used to work with who would just like push dogs over and then they'd get mad and start barking at him, and he'd be like, haha, I'm just playing with your dog, like, I'm just what a funny joke, I pushed it or something. And I was like trying to incorporate that into the show, I guess.
Like it. I mean, there's that style of like, it's not quite an anti-joke, like where you're trying to ruin it. It's not smart
enough to be an anti-joke. It's just being mean and then being like, haha, you get it? I'm being funny. It's like, no, you're not. You're just being a dick.
Yeah, I mean,
that kind of stuff makes me laugh.
Yeah, definitely. I think. I mean, from kind of seeing your stuff, it's like there's value in leaving space around the joke. Like, I think a lot of shows now like always try to explain the joke or like put so much context in that you basically like walked through the joke. Whereas,
yeah, that's not something I'm too crazy about.
No.
I'm sure I'm guilty of it here and there, but yeah, I try to avoid that because it just feels like, I don't know. I mean, if it made me laugh, I would do it. It's not like I have some moral opposition. It's just, you're kind of going, yeah, I understand the joke. You don't need to explain it 3 times and reword it. Yeah, there's a lot of that in, I'm particularly in American comedy right now. Maybe in British comedy too, but
there's edges of it in British comedy.
Yeah,
British comedy is like a little weird at the moment.
Have you seen that show, Stathlets Flats? I love that show.
No,
it's a British show. I'm obsessed with that one lately. I mean, it's over now. They did 3 seasons, and I think it's done. But
I mean, that's
really funny show.
That's UK comedy. That's UK shows. We make 5 shows and then you cancel it, and then
I love that Simpsons joke that's like, it's England's #1 like long running comedy, and today we're showing all 6 episodes or something.
Just Google Stathlets Flats. I mean, that looks familiar, and it does look very British.
Jamie Demetriou.
Yeah. Have you seen?
That's a really fun show.
Have you seen People Just Do Nothing?
Oh, I love that show. Yeah.
I'd say that's very much UK comedy.
Yeah. I think I like Staff more, but I was pretty into that one.
Yeah. There's just it's leaving the space around it so someone else can make the joke for you, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I like that kind of thing. Yeah. There's so much, especially on People Just Do Nothing. There's so many kind of long-running jokes on the show that are sort of left unsaid. I mean, like the most obvious one that comes to mind is just the whole situation with, the main guy and his girlfriend, and what's the other guy's name? Decoy. And their daughter is clearly Decoy's because I feel like they never actually acknowledge that, right? Nope. Like, it's not like they're beating you over the head with the joke. It'll just sort of pan over to Decoy looking awkward every once in a while.
I always loved about People Just Do Nothing was just it was just the complete level of tension between the 2 main characters and how in love with like he was with him. It's just there, but nobody ever really broaches how much he loves him. But he loves him. Like
Beats and Grinder, that was the name, right?
Beats and Grinder, just like it's top tier leveling.
Beats and his wife or girlfriend Roche, I think, became my 2 favorite characters.
Yeah.
Man, I kind of want to watch that again. It's been a while.
I need to see the movie came out.
That came out during the pandemic, right?
Yeah. That's why I didn't see it.
Well, I'm sure you can watch it at home now, but I saw the show right before the pandemic, and then kind of forgot about it for a little while, and it seemed like the movie was coming for a long time, probably because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
But I feel like over like 2 years, I remembered hearing like, oh, they're gonna do a movie. They're shooting the movie. It's done. And then you're kind of like, where is it? Is it coming? And now it's out, I guess. But it took a while.
It did. It took a while. I mean, in terms of kind of like your work, obviously you worked with big boys in terms of animation, if there is a word. The Comedy Centrals, the big kids.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I mean, you find creating your independent stuff like cathartic from working with that, or is it just
not necessarily because there's things that it's not like I'm trying to do things that I wouldn't be allowed to do in not like trying to push the envelope with super edgy stuff, but it's just I like the immediacy of doing it independently. Maybe immediacy is not the right word given how slow I am about it, but
it's animation, it takes forever.
You can just do a thing because you want to, as opposed to having to then justify it to the creator of the show and then to the executives of the network and stuff. you know, rather than all these layers of sort of questioning, like, why is this funny? Like, I don't get it. Like, and you have to be like, well, it'll be funny when we actually finish it, you know, like the finished version will be funny. You can kind of have a weird idea in your head and go like, I think this would be funny if I animate it like this, and you don't have to sort of justify it or sell it to people.
Yeah. Do you find there's a barrier there when like explaining things, which like you know how it's animated in your head, and then you're like, I'm not gonna be showing this for like 4 months.
I mean, I don't always really. It's not like I have a perfect image of how I'm going to draw something, but there's ideas I have a lot of the time for, you know, the timing of something, or like I know that this will be funny if, or I think this will be funny if I have like the right sound effect here or something. But it's hard to just sort of tell someone, and then this sound effect will play when they do this, and it'll be funny. You know, you kind of. I think that affects the kind of things that get made in a lot of ways, because they have to be things that you can pitch, you know? Pitching culture is so different from the actual act of making a good thing. You know, being good at pitching is such a separate skill. And I feel like I'm not good at pitching really at all, but I'm decent at least at actually making stuff. But just the kind of jokes that you see in things tend to be things that are immediately understandable when they just explain it. Because of that whole process, I think, of, you know, having to sell it to 5 layers of executives or whatever.
I always say that artists tend to need kind of like a personal assistant who can speak the other language, because explaining things, like as an artist, you kind of sit and you think, okay, like, so I'm going to do this. And then as soon as you've said it out loud, it sounds ridiculous.
Yeah, exactly. And then you're like, well, maybe if I put it back from out loud into like just existing, then it'll work. But there's that moment where you're like, uh-oh, I just said it and it sounds stupid.
It sounds stupid, but I still want to do it.
Exactly. Well, it happens a lot with Sublo and Tangy Mustard. I'll describe a scene to a friend or something, and I'll be like, and then Sublo does this, and Tangy Mustard does that, and they just go, oh, okay, cool. And then I'm like, oh, well, this is why I don't want to tell anybody until it's done, because it's just discouraging, you know.
It is a real problem. I always think of it like, I think like you're saying, like I think a lot of big companies and mainstream companies don't go down surreal lines because it is so hard to understand. Like, you know, like an abstract scene, how are you going to describe an abstract scene? Like, well, it's like a pencil, and the pencil turns into a crow, and then the crow flies away, and they're like, why? And I'm like, just reasons.
Well, that's the hard thing too, that they need like logic for everything. And sometimes there is no logic other than just, I don't know, emotional logic or something, you know, or is some kind of intuitive, it feels right, but I don't know. It's not like I'm doing anything super artsy or surreal in my cartoons, but like I said, it's cathartic to just be able to be like, oh, I want to do this, so I'm going to do this, as opposed to I want to do this, so I'm going to spend months communicating why we should do this.
You just follow what you're interested in. Follow that red thread.
Exactly.
Lip your way through. I mean, I did look at the episodes you were kind of involved with, like Tuca and Bertie and Bojack and stuff, and it always seems like you end up in episodes which have really heavy themes.
Like, well, that's just almost every episode of Bojack.
I know that's it. Like Bojack. Like I looked up and I was like, okay, so the episodes you were involved with were some of my favorite episodes.
Oh, that's good to hear.
And I was like, it just seems like you end up attracted to these like ones which were like off the end of like, okay, there's no formal narrative here. We're just diving in and seeing what happens.
I guess so. I mean, I was on that underwater episode, the fish out of water, I think it's called. That one was a lot of fun, and like you said, it's like a pretty unusual episode because there's no talking, so we kind of wound up. It almost felt like making an episode of some other thing, because so much of the usual process of Bojack was based around the dialogue. You know, you'd get the radio play, and then you'd start drawing things, and there was no radio play for that because it was just silence. And then for a while they kept putting me on episode 11s, you know, for 2 seasons, I think, or maybe 3, I forget. But just because of the order of, you know, you direct every fourth episode, I think, basically, because there's 4 teams that each did 3 episodes, basically.
Right.
So I would do episodes 3, 7, and 11. And 11 is always sort of the crazy climax to the season, basically. So yeah, I did a couple of those. That Time Zero one, I think, where Bojack's mom's going through all her memories. And then the next season is one where Bojack is losing his grasp on reality.
Yeah.
That was a really fun one to do because we were trying to figure out low-cost ways to make it feel more like a super cinematic detective show. To try and blur the line. Like, we wanted the filmmaking to feel different here and there.
Yeah.
To make it seem like we weren't always being clear in the text of the show whether we were in reality or not, but we try and make it clear with the filmmaking whether we were in reality versus in Bojack's head of the show that he was working on.
Yeah.
Except for then there was also moments where we deliberately made it unclear.
Because of the matter, she got to troll the audience every so often.
Yeah. But that was a fun one. Man, I miss doing that episode.
Oh,
it's funny. Certain episodes, like, you really feel like don't have much memory of doing them. You're like, I guess I remember doing that one, but it feels like it just took a week or something. And then there's other ones where it's like, I feel like I was working on that one for months. Like that Showstopper one where he's at the end of season 5. That felt like such a saga.
Yeah.
Not in a bad way. It was a fun one to work on. Or the underwater episode,
Yeah.
Felt like we were working on that for like half a season. But then there's other episodes I did, like there's this one where Todd visits his girlfriend's family and they're all axolotls, or however you say it, and they're all obsessed with sex, and he's asexual, and that one, it feels like we did in like 2 weeks or something.
Right.
I just don't have a lot of memory of it.
Just blocking out some spaces or burned out in the spaces.
I think I was just distracted, maybe. Oh, it's because I had some new storyboarders on my team that season. So maybe and that was the first one we did. So I was maybe focused more on the practical side of it than like the story side for that one. And then there's other ones where you're really thinking more about the content of the episode and less about who am I going to give this next scene to and how am I going to give these notes or whatever.
Yeah. When you step back from kind of like managing people, you end up focusing more on what's actually being produced. Yeah.
Well, that was the weird thing about starting directing that I never predicted, was how much of it is like people management, Like, this person is good at this kind of stuff, but I have to give them this scene that doesn't have any of that because they're available today, and the person who I want to give this scene to isn't available till next week, so I'm going to save it for them or whatever. And there's a lot of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I'd say almost like 40% of the job is that, and the other 60% is the actual creative side, maybe.
Yeah. But do you enjoy that side? I guess that's a good question.
Initially I was like pretty overwhelmed by it. I was like, I thought I'd just be making creative choices, but I'm like running a team.
Yeah.
Because I was foolish, and it didn't occur to me really. But I came to enjoy it because I got better at it. Like, once you kind of know how to do it, it stops being a terrifying thing where you're trying to juggle all these different balls. Yeah. And it just becomes like, oh, I'll throw this ball to this person, I'll throw this one to that person, and I know that they can handle it. And,
becomes
I know
muscle memory.
Fix it if it doesn't come back right or whatever. Yeah. So I ended up enjoying the process a lot. Yeah.
I mean, as I say, kind of like those episodes were, for me, the ones which like tread that line of what you can do in animation versus just like, oh, we're doing a story. Like, creating a story. Yeah. It's like the media I consume tends to be more down the abstract line, and films which I watch, like I love those kinds of things because what you can produce is so detached from reality and relies heavily on visuals. So it was seeing those, and then finding your show was seeing someone who really enjoys animation. I was like, I like this. I need to talk to this guy.
What kind of like films are you thinking of when you say that?
So I mean, my mind's coming back. So when I think of when I think of Pi with like Darren Aronofsky.
I haven't seen that.
There's a film called Killing Them Softly, which has it's like a gangster film, but in the middle of it has like a weird abstract bit where he gets high and just kind of drifts off. And
Oh, interesting.
yeah, and I like things which have that edge of kind of some surrealism to it. And the same with kind of the animations and things I watch. I was like, in English, grew up with Monty Python, so Terry Gilliam was like a big influence of things you could do with animation blending in with live action and just
Terry
throwing
Gilliam's
things in. Yeah,
amazing.
All of Terry Gilliam's stuff. I'm just like, yeah, I'm just gonna consume all of this.
Just hook it to my veins.
Yeah, he's one of the few people who I kind of click on and subscribe to. If I need to know when your next film's coming out.
Yeah. Put me on the newsletter, Terry.
Yeah, it's anything which like that, which produces an edge of we're doing this because we want to be doing this. Is what gets me. And when you see people who are passionate about making things, I think so. Like I asked you, one of the earliest animations you remember. The first one I remember was the Peter Gabriel video for Sledgehammer.
Oh, that thing is amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's like my first memory of animated anything. And
that's a good introduction to animation.
Yeah, it just showed me, and from that moment on, I was like, well, everything stop motion is fantastic. So
yeah, stop motion is so kind of like, even though you can know exactly how it's done, and then you see it, and it still feels like magic. Yeah.
And
I think more than even like hand drawn stuff, because that it's like just a thing sitting on a table somewhere that's not moving. But
yeah,
I don't know. Yeah, I think stop motion has like its own very special kind of appeal for sure.
Yeah, I mean, kind of like you, the same with just the idea that animation comes from essentially nothing, that you're producing something and then bringing it to life. Like you're not just recording people doing their thing. You give a character and you're like, cool, I've got a character, but that character doesn't have sound unless I give them sound.
Yeah, it's so interesting how like there's strengths and weaknesses to that. Like I feel like making stuff feel spontaneous is one of the biggest like magic tricks in animation, where because it's so easy for things to feel really like planned out.
Yeah.
Which I think you see in a lot of like student shorts. I don't know if you're watching any animated student shorts, but a lot of them feel very like you can kind of see the wheels turn or see the gears turning of like we want to do this, so we're going to start here and point over here, and then we're going to get to here. Yeah. I don't know. I like it when you can't tell what's going to happen next, or what the character is going to do next. Which, yeah, it's hard. I mean, because you have to plan everything out, but you have to plan it in a way that doesn't feel planned out. One of the Looney Tunes directors, Bob Clampett, was really good at that kind of thing. His characters all just feel out of control.
Yeah.
In a good way, in a fun way.
There's beauty in that. Just that whole, it is planned. It's very structured. It's very planned. But
yeah, stop motion, especially because you have to do it all in one pass. You know what I mean? Like with 2D animation, you can draw a character doing stuff and then add like a floppy hat on each drawing after or something. But with stop motion, everything has to be happening in super slow motion, but basically live. Over a long period and then compressed. Which is mind-boggling to me. Like the few times that I've tried stop motion, I've been like, okay, I would need to work at this for a long time to get good enough to make it effective.
I think a lot of stop motion hangs heavily on dialogue as well, especially to make it feel natural. I mean, that was something I always loved about the Wallace and Gromit stuff. Was just it was so well written and everything felt so natural.
Definitely,
everything around it just fits. Like,
Aardman's really good at that. Their stuff feels, it's got a good balance of like being planned out, but like I was saying, but feeling spontaneous and natural and just really believable, and also just appealing. Everything kind of happens in appealing ways in their stuff.
It's just very nice.
What their magic formula is, but
comforting.
yeah.
I feel along those ways. I mean, we're kind of running into the hour of coming up to the end of this hour. It's been a chat through. It's been, the chat away. But I mean, I'm curious, kind of your view in terms of where independent stuff plays into the wider world of, as someone who's been involved in both, and as someone who's obviously very passionate about what you do and making things and continue to make things. I always think it's valuable to make things, but other people very much look along the lines of, no, you've got to go bigger, you've got to go larger. And I'm kind of just curious about your views.
Oh, I don't think so. Yeah, I definitely don't think bigger is always better. And like there's a friend of mine who, with the best intentions, has been trying to get me to do Sublo and Tangy Mustard at like a bigger scale. And he's like, "Why don't you pitch it to Netflix?" And at this point, I'm very glad I didn't pitch it to Netflix. Or I mean, I could have pitched it, but I'm very glad that it didn't end up happening with them. Yeah, I think it's, some things you can only do at a big scale, but there's a lot of stuff that really, I think, has value in being smaller and more personal and not being kind of compromised to become a bigger thing, and with independent animation in particular, it's tough because there's not really, I mean, it's the same as with live action shorts. There's not really an audience for shorts that much. I mean, sometimes there is. It depends on what the thing is, but like there's festivals and stuff, and if you put a short online, people will watch it. But generally, people either want to watch like a 15-second clip or something, or like sit down and watch like a full half hour or a movie or something. So it can be hard to figure out how to get somebody to watch a thing that's like 6 minutes long.
Yeah,
I think it's kind of an awkward length where you're like, well, do I sit down on the couch and like put this on the TV, or do I just kind of like look at it quick on my phone and then get back to scrolling the feed or whatever?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Independent animation, I think, is going to be more important in the future, because you can see a lot of these bigger companies sort of crumbling right now. I mean, not necessarily that they're going to entirely fall apart, but they might start hammering like patches back onto the missing pieces, but they're sure not in a good place right now.
It's interesting.
What were you going to say?
I was going to say, it's interesting that you mentioned the idea of like, it's hard to get people to watch things of a certain kind of length, because when I think of like growing up, when like the internet was kind of kicking off and like flash animation was at like its peak and everyone was producing these weird cartoons every week, like David Firth comes to mind, who made Salad Fingers and the Toast Boy and all those kinds of things. Those are the things we were watching. No one was like, oh, we want a 10-second video. Everyone's like, no, I'm going to sit down and watch a 2 minutes of absolute weirdness.
Well, that's the thing. I think it's changed because a site like Newgrounds, I guess, would be the exception, because there's like an audience there who's, they're there because they want to see animated shorts or indie games or whatever.
Yeah.
But and obviously there's lots of short stuff that does really well on YouTube. I don't mean that to be like the scapegoat for why my stuff is more successful, but I think to an extent that it's gone that way more. Where with like first Vine and now TikTok more. People do they're either like, am I just like kind of scrolling more actively and then, like looking at things as they come up, or am I going to sit and, watch a longer form thing?
Yeah.
But I think even at the peak of the internet, I think that was maybe the best time for shorts, because, all right, what did I say? The peak of the internet? I mean, peak.
Brought it down with spiral of this
peak independent internet, let's say, like mid 2000s maybe. I think that was a better time for shorts, because there was more people sitting at their computers as opposed to like looking on their phones or watching a streaming thing on TV. I mean, maybe people are still doing it, but I think the era where the most people, or where the majority of the audience is sitting at a desktop computer watching stuff, is maybe past, and that might be a better format for watching shorts, maybe. Because I'm getting pretty into the weeds with this weird train of thought, but
that's what we're here for.
But you know what I mean, because you're sort of able to just be passive and watch a thing, but you're also able to like click around. But if you're on your phone, you're holding it, you're kind of like, okay, when's the next time I can react? Or react, when's the next time I can like do something with my hand? I'm holding my thumb up, I want to push it down.
It's a strange thing. It's almost like, I don't know, like, because it's very generational as well. Like, I'd say like our generation is very used to, you'll have YouTube on in the background and you'll have videos just going through videos and videos. So you'll discover new things and you'll watch 3-minute videos. And whereas younger generations are very much, like we say, skip through because I want my hands free, everything should be easy, or I'm listening to a podcast, which takes a while to kind of listen to. And
yeah, I just feel like, it's either short or long form tends to be what most things are.
Yeah. Whereas like people older than us won't sit and watch YouTube.
Exactly. Yeah. That's an interesting question that I think of sometimes, where you're like, oh, not necessarily specifically with animation, but there's a lot of things where you kind of will feel like, I want to do this thing. How can I make it work? Because I should be able to make it work because I want to do it. And so, trying to phrase this in a way that makes it understandable without being too vague. But, I mean, specifically with my cartoon, I'm like, oh, what's the magic thing that I have to do to make it like successful?
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, maybe why should it be successful? I mean, it's not like a given that somebody should be able to make a cartoon at this scale independently and that it should be a success. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, that makes sense. So the kind of idea of like, what's the key to getting this out there?
Yeah.
But at the same time, kind of like, well, why would anyone watch me anyway?
Yeah, like you can't necessarily assume that there is a world where, like, if you did the right sequence of promotional things or something, that it would be a success. I mean, I'm trying to avoid mentioning Woody Allen, but I remember he said this in a way that kind of made sense to me, where he was like, oh, I'm really lucky to have been in the 20th century where, being a good writer is like a skill that's highly in demand. Because if it was like the Dark Ages and I was living then and I was a great writer, I wouldn't have, it wouldn't have done me any good. I should have been like a great fighter or a farmer or something. That like, just because you want to do something doesn't necessarily mean that there is like a use for it, I guess.
Yeah. I think that's important to keep in mind. Like, especially when you're making anything, I always think of it along the lines of it shouldn't matter whether anyone's going to see it. Or
that's the thing. Yeah. I mean, I'm not, and that's there's like a freedom in that too, where I like the reason I'm doing Sublo and Tangy Mustard or anything really is just because I enjoy the act of doing it, and less so because I'm like, well, there's going to be some big payoff if I do it right, Yeah. Because it's like, there is no right way. It's just whatever I want to do.
And that's a great attitude to have. And why I enjoy Sublo and Tangy Mustard.
Thanks.
I think that's a good point to round this out on.
All right, yeah. I started rambling for a while, but I guess we ended up tying it back somehow.
we always do. That's how this show works. Is we get on like a whole tangent and then we come back around with like a nice ending point. I do have one more question, which was posed by my friend who I recently forced to watch the whole thing about Sublo and Tangy Mustard, and it's specific. So obviously, Sublo's a submarine because he works at a sub shop. But why is Tangy Mustard like a parrot?
Well, it doesn't have anything to do with his name. I guess he's a... There was some reason.
She watched through the whole thing and she asked me, and I was like, I don't know.
It's something about nautical something. I'd have to ask Aaron back in 2014, I guess. But yeah, I think it's just maybe Tuca and Sam. I don't know. It just seemed like the kind of mascot character that you would have. Maybe there is a green parrot mascot. Shit. But anyway, yeah, I don't know. I just was kind of thinking of random things, and I thought it'd be funny if he was a parrot.
Parrot's parrot.
No good answer for that, really. It's just arbitrary, I guess, at a certain point.
It's just high level concept. That's all it is. Like,
it's
completely intentional. It's just it's something for the scholars to discuss when they look back on Sublo.
Exactly, generations from now.
Yeah, someone will clarify this for you. You don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, they'll be able to read the the authorial intent.
Yeah.
By picking up on the subtext that I wasn't aware of.
Exactly. That's the way to do all this stuff. It's been great to speak to you, Aaron.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you for coming and chatting to me. And yeah, we'll round it out there, and we will talk to these guys later.
All right, bye.